Have you ever faced one of those huge, life-altering decisions and just wished for a crystal clear sign? A little nudge in the right direction? Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating concept that's all about that. It's called the inner witness. So let's get into it and see what it's all about. The whole idea really kicks off with this powerful promise from the book of John. It says, a spiritual guide is available to lead you. And that's not just a nice thought, it's framed as a direct personal promise for guidance. Okay, but that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's one thing to believe a guide exists, but how in the world do you actually hear from it? I mean, how do you tune into that frequency with all the noise of daily life going on? That is exactly what we are going to break down right now.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the promise of this guide, then we'll get into what the inner witness actually is. From there, we'll look at 8 different ways it can show up in your life, and we'll finish up with something super important, a safety check so you can test what you're sensing.
First up, let's lay the foundation. We've got to understand the thinking behind this whole guidance system. Who exactly is this guide, and what's its job? What's really cool is the original meaning of the word guide here. It's not about control, like a puppet master taking over your life. The source material makes it clear that it simply means to show the way. Think of it like a trusted local who knows the area, pointing out the best path for you to take. And this verse really nails how that path gets shown. It's a spiritual thing. This guidance isn't about revealing stuff you could just figure out with a spreadsheet or a pros and cons list. It's about uncovering things that, according to the text, our natural senses just can't pick up on their own. So, let's move on. We've established that there's a guide. Now let's define how it communicates through this core idea, the inner witness. Okay, so here's the key. The inner witness isn't some booming voice from the clouds. The source describes it as the spirit basically agreeing with or confirming something deep within our own spirit. This creates a really solid internal conviction. Think of it less like a shout and way more like a gentle, persistent nudge or a quiet tap on your shoulder. Of course, the first thing you're probably asking is, okay, but how do I know this isn't just my own feelings, my own wants, or maybe just a bad case of anxiety? That's a great question, and this slide lays out the key differences. A true inner witness is spirit-led and brings a sense of peace, even when things are tough. Our own emotions, on the other hand, are often led by our soul, can feel really anxious, and might just be rooted in what we want for ourselves. Now we get to the really practical part. The source material actually breaks down this gentle nudge into 8 specific ways it can show up. This is kind of like the menu of how that inner witness can actually talk to you. And here they all are. Some of them are pretty easy to get, like the assurance within or the warning within. Others are a little more subtle. For instance, a quickening of scripture isn't just remembering a Bible verse. It's when a verse you've read 100 times suddenly lights up with brand new meaning for your exact situation. Or the stirring within, which is like a deep motivational pull toward doing something specific. Let's zoom in on a few examples to see how this all works in the real world. Let's kick things off with one of the most fundamental expressions, that quiet, internal feeling of assurance or peace. The source text uses this fantastic analogy. The Greek word for rule in the phrase, let the peace of God rule in your hearts, is brabeuo. Now, you might be surprised to hear this, but that's the word for an umpire in a game. The person who decides, directs, and makes the final call. So the whole idea is that peace itself acts as the umpire for your decisions. If you're thinking about a certain path and you feel a deep, settled peace about it, that's the umpire saying, safe. But if you feel troubled, anxious, or just off, that's the umpire yelling, you're out. It's basically a stop signal. All right, let's switch gears to a much more active form of guidance. This isn't just a feeling of peace. It's a strong urge to do something, and often to do it right away. This is called the prompting within. The author of our source material shares this amazing story about this. He was at his job one day when he suddenly got this strong, out-of-the-blue prompting to open a new location for his church. He didn't sit on it. He walked right over to a colleague who made one phone call. And just like that, based on that one immediate feeling, a brand new location was secured that very same day. Incredible. The third example we'll check out is, well, it's maybe the most powerful one. It's not really a feeling or a nudge to act, but a deep, unshakable conviction about something. It's just a knowing. This quote from the source is just so powerful. The author explains that as a teenager, a knowing simply gripped his heart. There weren't any spectacular signs or visions. It was just an internal certainty that ended up guiding his entire life. It really shows how this inner witness can shape not just one decision, but a whole lifetime. Okay, so we've seen how this guidance can show up, but this brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most important part of this whole thing. How do you do this responsibly? How do you actually test what you're sensing? I mean, this is the essential question, right? It's so easy to mistake a strong personal desire or even a bad pizza dream for some kind of divine guidance. So what's the safety mechanism here? What's the filter you can run these feelings through to check them out?
Well, the source material gives us this brilliant 4-point checklist. First, the scripture check. Does what you're feeling contradict anything in the Bible? The source is really clear on this. The Spirit and the Word won't disagree. Second, the heart check. Is this about a higher purpose, or is it secretly all about you? Third, the wisdom check. Does this actually make sense in the big picture of your life? And finally, and this is my personal favorite, the action check. Can you just test the waters? Instead of making a massive life change tomorrow, maybe you just make one phone call. Take one small, reversible step and see if the door opens a little wider. And that brings us to our final thought for today. As you look back on your own life, your own big decisions, think about this. Which of these signals, the assurance, the prompting, the knowing, the warning, have you maybe felt before without ever really having the words or a framework to understand what it was?